2, 1. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. The topic today that I'll be giving you a speech on is euthanasia. General purpose is to persuade you to think critically about the topic. My thesis today is that euthanasia should be a practice rejected by all Christians. So my first question is, what makes a human valuable? Does it depend on whether they are pretty or not? How about if someone is born without any limbs? Does that person have less value? How about the people who are born with Down syndrome? Are they less valuable because they are unable to reason like the rest of us? Consider lastly, do children or the elderly have less value because they do not have self-autonomy and are unable to help themselves? Well, why should you listen to me? The number of people being euthanized around the world is growing larger and larger every year. And thus, my thesis statement, euthanasia should be a practice rejected by all Christians. Previewing my main points, first I am going to address the utilitarian worldview of our Western culture. Second, I am going to address personhood theory and how it affects both babies in the womb and the elderly. Third, I will discuss that humans are made in the image of God and have the highest value for that purpose alone. From one side of the world to the other, humans are and always have been viewed as less valuable based on many different factors. Utilitarianism is the philosophical, ethical standard for nearly every person walking the streets where you live. John Stuart Mill, one of the most important advocates for utilitarianism, says, "The creed which accepts as the foundation of morals, utility, or the greatest happiness principle, holds that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to reverse happiness." You may have heard this terminology in more simple language. When someone says, "Well, if that makes you happy, then I'm happy," or "whatever makes you happy." Perhaps more common is the phrase, "just do what makes you happy." Well, what if a mother says, "It will make me happy to abort my child"? What if your grandmother or grandfather says, "I'm tired of living because I can't really do much anymore. I can't move around like I used to, and it would make me happy to just be done with it all." And they seek assisted suicide. Is it wrong to deny these individuals their happiness? Dr. Branch, professor of ethics from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, asks an important question. How does one weigh or measure happiness? The truth is, it can't be done. Happiness cannot be quantified. It is totally subjective, and that is why there must be standards based upon moral absolutes as it regards euthanasia, because it cannot just be based on what brings someone the most happiness, because it is possible that what makes them happy could actually be sinful. Now that I have described utilitarianism as doing what brings about the most happiness and how that relates to modern thinking about euthanasia, I'm going to move into describing personhood theory as I believe it flows out of utilitarianism. Personhood theory is the mode of thinking that divides the human in two ways, objective and subjective. Babies in the womb are indeed human. However, babies in the womb are indeed human. Likewise, the elderly are indeed human from an objective standpoint. However, the subjective aspect comes into play when discussing whether the baby or the elder person is a person. Now, what makes a person, according to this theory? Dr. Peter Singer, a well-known modern philosopher and ethicist, is quoted by the Independent Living Institute saying that for a person to be a person, that being must be self-aware and capable of perceiving themselves as individuals through time. According to Dr. Singer, you can cross off all babies in the womb, infants, many toddlers, and those suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's, and anyone in a coma. In fact, he said, it may be all right to kill people whose doctors claim they are severely cognitively disabled, and that such people are not persons. Consider what this implies for the mentally retarded, demented, those in vegetative states, or those suffering from brain damage. So then how does personhood theory flow out of utilitarianism, and how does this relate to our topic today concerning euthanasia? It flows out of utilitarianism in that whatever leads to the greatest happiness applies only to those who can voice what would make them happy. Lead singer of Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, has openly said that the band would not have made it had she not aborted her child. She killed her child because her happiness was at stake. Her baby didn't have a voice, but that did not make the child any less valuable as a human. The same could be said for every old person who is suffering pain or is unable to function like they once could, who is encouraged to be euthanized so that they no longer have to suffer, or so that hospital bills won't drown their families in debt. All of this shows how little our culture values each human, and the reason is that most people don't see humans as image bearers of God, but are viewed through the lens of what they can do and how much happiness they can contribute to those around them. Well, now that we have an understanding of how utilitarianism and personhood theory have influenced the thinking of most people in our Western culture, I will address the proper way of viewing the homeless man on your street, the child that's in the womb, the person with Down syndrome, and all the grandmothers who are bedridden and must be spoon-fed by one of their family members for every meal in order to stay alive. Genesis 1:27 says that God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Here is the starting point for every single human being from the moment of conception and forever after. They bear the image of their Creator and thus have inestimable value. Indeed, Genesis 9:6 also says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man." Theologian Francis Schaeffer says in his book, The God Who Is There, that the mannishness of man are those aspects of man such as significance, love, rationality, and the fear of non-being, which marks him off from animals and machines and gives evidence of his being created in the image of a personal God. Given that each person is made in the image of God and therefore has a value that we cannot truly comprehend, how are we to view people practically? Schaeffer says in another book, Escape from Reason, we cannot deal with people like human beings. We cannot deal with them on the high level of true humanity unless we really know their origin, who they are. God tells man who he is. God tells us that he created man in his image, so man is something quite wonderful. It does not matter whether someone is pretty, ugly, has 4 limbs or 2, is smart or dumb, is able-bodied or confined to a wheelchair, is rich or poor. Every single human being is made in the image of God, and their lives must be cared for at all costs. Lastly, theologian John Calvin says in his Institutes, when speaking of the commandment, "Thou shalt not murder," the aim here is to show that because God has joined the whole human race together in unity, the safety and preservation of all should be dear to each of us. Thus, in sum, all violence, wrong, and harm that physically injure our neighbor are forbidden to us. Hence, passing on the commandment itself, we are told that if we can do anything to preserve our neighbor's life, we must loyally strive to do so, whether by supplying whatever is needful or by avoiding whatever is contrary to that. Likewise, if they are in peril or distress, we are to help and assist them. Well, in review of my main points, I first discussed utilitarianism and its stronghold in the minds of those in our culture. Second, I discussed personhood theory, how it flows downstream from utilitarianism and how it affects our view of the weak and vulnerable in our culture. Finally, I discussed that every human is made in the image of God and therefore must be treated accordingly. So in sum, euthanasia should be a practice rejected by all Christians. Therefore, we must seek to have our minds transformed in such a way that God would be pleased with us. And in doing so, we will see every single human being as valuable regardless of their station in life, and thus deserving of our love and protection because they are made in the image of their Creator, just as you are. Thank you.